Three men won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of DNA. One of them had seen the key photograph behind a closed door 4 days after a colleague slipped it to him without permission. The second had received a confidential research report, not his lab's, handed over by his own supervisor. The third spent the rest of his life telling the world that the woman who made it all possible was difficult, belligerent, a secretary who couldn't read her own data. She was dead by then. She'd been dead for 4 years. She never knew her photograph had left the building. She never knew her data had been handed to strangers. She never knew what they would write about her after she was gone. Her name was Rosalind Franklin. And this isn't a story about 3 men who stole something. It's a story about a system so well built that nobody had to. London, 1920. A wealthy Jewish family. A girl who decides at 15 she's going to be a scientist. Her father tries to talk her out of it, not because he's cruel, because he knows. She goes anyway. Cambridge, then Paris, where she becomes one of the best X-ray crystallographers alive. The colleagues who actually worked with her remembered the same woman, sharp, funny, warm. Hold on to that, because the woman the world will eventually remember bears almost no resemblance to the woman who actually existed. In 1951, she's recruited to King's College London. They tell her she'll lead the X-ray work on DNA, her project, her lab. She doesn't know it yet, but she's just walked into the machine. Maurice Wilkins is a physicist at King's, also studying DNA. Separately, different methods, different track. Nobody tells him clearly that Franklin is not his assistant, so he assumes she is. For months, he tries to direct her work. She refuses. She has every right to. The lab director put her on DNA. It's her project. But the building treats her like she's overstepping. The men eat in one dining hall, the women in another. She can't even share lunch with the colleague she's supposedly in conflict with. The atmosphere gets hostile enough that she starts looking for another job, not because she's failing, because she's drowning in a place that won't admit she belongs. But before she leaves, she does the work. May 6, 1952, Rosalind and her PhD student Raymond Gosling expose a single strand of DNA to X-rays for 62 hours. 62 hours. The result is one photograph. To anyone else, it looks like a blurry X. To a crystallographer, it's a confession. DNA is a helix, 2 strands, backbone on the outside, the blueprint of every living thing, photographed for the first time in human history. She labels it Photo 51, files it away. She isn't ready to publish, that's how she works. Meticulous, certain, never speculating until the data is airtight. She has no idea that photograph is about to walk out of the building without her. January 1953. Franklin has accepted a job at Birkbeck College. She's leaving King's. Her PhD student has been reassigned to Wilkins. On January 26th, Wilkins sees Photo 51 for the first time. 4 days later, he shows it to James Watson from a different lab, a different university, a direct competitor. She wasn't asked, wasn't told, wasn't in the room. That was the first breach. The second, almost nobody talks about. Franklin's lab was funded by the Medical Research Council. As part of that funding, she had to submit a research report, detailed measurements, calculations, her interpretation of the structure of DNA, months of work, on paper. That report went to a committee. One of the committee members was a man named Max Perutz. Max Perutz was Francis Crick's PhD supervisor at Cambridge. Perutz handed the report directly to Crick. Read that again. Her data, handed by one man to another, straight to her competitors. Perutz later said the report wasn't marked confidential, that it was meant to circulate. Historians still argue about whether that's an explanation or an excuse. What nobody disputes is what Watson and Crick had in their hands by the end of January 1953. Photo 51, passed by one man, her data handed over by another. Two men, two separate decisions. One woman's work walked out the door twice. She didn't know any of it. April 25, 1953, Watson and Crick published their model of the DNA double helix in Nature. Rosalind's name appears once in a footnote. The day before their paper went to print, she finished her own draft. Same conclusions, her data, her handwriting. She'd been beaten in a race she didn't know was happening. She left King's. At Birkbeck, she thrived. Her own team cracked the structure of the tobacco mosaic virus. Friends who knew her in those years said she was the happiest she'd ever been. In 1956, she found out she had ovarian cancer. She was 35. The likely cause was the X-ray equipment. The same machinery that had produced Photo 51 had been irradiating her for years. No protective shielding. Nobody knew yet how dangerous it was. She kept working. She published papers from her hospital bed. In 1958, she died. She was 37. She didn't know a manuscript was being written that would describe her as belligerent and incompetent. She didn't know a Nobel Prize was coming that she'd be ineligible to receive. She just died. 1962, 4 years after her funeral, Watson, Crick, and Wilkins walk onto a stage in Stockholm and accept the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. The Nobel cannot be awarded posthumously. The committee didn't even have to consider her. The system worked exactly as designed. 6 years later, James Watson publishes a memoir, The Double Helix. In it, he describes Rosalind as belligerent, emotional, unable to keep her temper. He depicts her as Wilkins' assistant, a lab tech who didn't understand what she was looking at. He calls her Rosie throughout, a nickname she never used, a nickname she hated. The book is published over the protests of multiple scientists who knew her, who knew the work, who knew exactly what had happened. They call it inaccurate, they call it defamatory. He publishes it anyway. It becomes a bestseller. For an entire generation, that was the story. The difficult woman who couldn't read her own photograph. The men who solved it despite her. She'd been dead for 10 years. She couldn't say a word. Watson eventually admitted Franklin should have won the Nobel. He said it after she was dead, after the prize had been given, after his book had already shaped how the world saw her. Convenient. Because here's what actually happened, piece by piece. A lab director didn't make her role clear, and a male colleague spent years treating her like an assistant. A funding structure required her to submit data that ended up in her competitor's hands. A colleague showed her photograph to another team 4 days after seeing it himself. A Nobel committee didn't consider a dead woman because that wasn't how it was done. A man wrote a best-selling book that defined her legacy for decades while she lay in the ground, unable to respond. No villain in a back room, no conspiracy, no signed agreement, just a system, working exactly as it was built. Every DNA test, every paternity case, every cancer treatment, every genetic therapy, every forensic investigation that ends with a perpetrator named decades after the crime. All of it traces back to a basement in London, 62 hours of radiation, one photograph, one woman whose name wasn't on the prize. She's on a British 50-pence coin now, her face, her photograph. It took them 70 years to put her there. She's still not on the Nobel.